I remember playing Rogue Squadron on the Nintendo 64 like it was yesterday. The thrill of watching X-Wings zip around me, the horror of trying dozens of times to bring down a walker with a speeder, and the sheer amazement at the impressive graphics are all fresh in my mind. Sitting down and playing the game again has me awash in nostalgia, and before I knew it, I had burned a couple hours playing through mission after mission before remembering, hey, idiot, you should probably be recording this. Rogue Squadron is a single-player first- or third-person Star Wars spacecraft shooter with a surprising amount of variation built into the missions. From search and destroy to classic kill everything to convoy escort missions, the goal, destroy the Empire's forces, was always the same, but the setting and way in which you had to carry out your goal changed often enough to avoid becoming too repetitive. The landscape of the planets in which the missions took place were different, but it was the man-made structures that really made those missions for me. Flying over a green planet filled with valleys only to come across a shining city that I had to protect was just one of those classic Star Wars Rogue Squadron moments that the new port brought back to me in full force. Though, as is the case when well over a decade or two separates your play of the original game versus the remake, everything felt somewhat smaller and simpler this time than it did way back then. I vividly recall spending hours beating my head against the wall trying to complete each mission in the past, but in Rogue Squadron 3D, I was able to fly through the missions without skipping a beat. Is that due to the fact that I've spent my adult life immersed in video games and thus my skill level has vastly improved, or is my memory of the game's difficulty just faulty? I don't know, and I don't want to speculate too much, lest I ruin the joy of the nostalgia, but it's a thought that's gnawing at the back of my head, even as I grin from ear to ear with every TIE bomber I destroy. And that's really what Rogue Squadron 3D is about, isn't it? It's a gift to those of us who grew up in the golden age of the console, when blowing on a cartridge wasn't just a practical way to get your game to work, but analogous to a gunfighter twirling his pistol before the shootout at high noon. We prepared for our games with the cracking of knuckles, gathering of snacks, and the selection of a perfect seat. We knew full well that it could take us hours to make the smallest amount of progress, but we did it anyway. Games, even hardcore ones, feel less serious today than they did in the past, at least in the preparation, but sitting down in front of Rogue Squadron 3D brought that feeling back, even if only in a small amount. Rogue Squadron was, for me, one of those few N64 games that stood out in a pack that was awash with titles designed to generate a quick buck. It was also one of the first games on the N64 to take advantage of the quote-unquote optional memory expansion pack that brought the resolution of the game up to a mind-blowing 640 by 480 pixels. The graphical and CPU tricks and tweaks that Rogue Squadron used to operate so well on the physical console make it nigh on unplayable on any current N64 emulators, unless your computer moonlights performing calculations for CERN and you're insanely lucky to get it running without feeling like you're watching a PowerPoint slideshow. On the whole, Rogue Squadron 3D fails on a few fronts but succeeds on many others. The application itself can't be alt-tabbed, windowed, or minimized easily, if at all. The interface is as clunky as ever, and the controller support is, as the description says, partial. User interface complaints aside, though, once you get into the actual gameplay, things take a turn for the awesome, assuming you have a controller, as using the keyboard and mouse is an exercise in pure frustration. I was able to get an Xbox One controller to work with the game after fiddling with both the pre-launch and in-game settings for a bit, and I suspect an Xbox 360 controller would work just as well. The music and audio effects are pure Star Wars, and though the voice acting isn't the best, it still has an authentic Star Wars feel. For those who played Rogue Squadron long ago and remember it fondly, the only thing I can really say to you is just get the game. For those who didn't play Rogue Squadron and are curious about this ancient title, it's more of a crapshoot. The good news is, though, with Steam's 2-hour refund policy, you'll have ample time to get through the quirks of setting up the game and taking a mission or two for a spin to decide for yourself whether you want to invest a few more hours breezing through the rest of the missions or not. Priced at $10 for the US market at launch, Rogue Squadron is a little bit expensive, but it's a fun little romp through history. And aside from some gripes about the general portiness of the user interface, it's a wonderful step back in time. In an age where nearly every N64 title is easily playable on an emulator except for the Rogue Squadron series, getting to play one again without having to dig out a physical console is a true joy. I can only hope that this initial release is only the start and we get to see Rogue Squadron 2 and 3 ported from the N64 and GameCube over to the PC before too much longer. This has been Game That with Mike, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.